It's going to be a great start to this recording, Michael, the giant yawn. Take it away.
Okay.
Oh, me.
Yeah,
take it
you.
away. It's me.
You-
Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the community working group for IPFS. Let's start with just a kind of quick check-in with everybody. I don't really have much to update. I've been really underwater with other kind of non-community related work. So I'll pass it off. I'm just going to go in order on my screen. Terry is next.
Okay.
Terry, what's up?
Poor Portia.
Portia's third, so it's not, well, in my screen. I don't know where
Oh, I thought you meant that. Okay, so a couple of updates from me. I have added, Dan suggested that I add this call to the guidance for protocol organizers. So that's now in the resources doc, in the repo there. And I also updated the new chapter template to clarify a few things that we were getting confusion and seeing kind of some consistent requests that are in a format we weren't expecting. So I have a little bit of more clarification in there. I've been highlighting offline camp on the local offline collaboration working group call. If anybody doesn't know about that one, it's about kind of the interaction between the decentralized web and offline use cases. So low or no bandwidth scenarios. So I dropped a link into the notes in the action items. If anybody wants to get more involved in that, a link to this working group so you can learn more about those calls, and also a link to register your interest for offline camp. When we get ready to announce the next dates and location, we will make sure that everybody on this list hears about it first. And then I've also been working on a draft roadmap and OKRs for Protoschool as it sort of becomes its own project, but we can save that for later in the call. It's on the agenda, I think. Oh, we also started 3 new chapters in places I can't pronounce in China and in Taiwan. So making progress.
Awesome. Now, Portia.
Awesome. Hey, so I spent a good amount of time working on the install section of our page. So we're trying to figure out like the best way to put out information in terms of how to engage and how to work on IPFS. So, I mean, I can briefly show you the PR. Let's see. So can you see it?
Ollie? I'm sorry to interrupt, Portia. We have never seen Ollie on a call before. I'm so excited.
I actually mentioned,
Welcome, Ollie.
I mentioned to Ollie that I will be part of the community call. He's like, can I join? I'm like, sure, the more the merrier.
Hi.
So far, the track record is that calls with Ollie on them are great calls. So
derailing.
Sorry to interrupt you, Portia. Please carry on with your demonstration.
No worries. So this is basically the install page. So when people look at the page, they know exactly like how to get started with IPFS. Here are some basic commands. I'm going to try to get this out as soon as possible. I've also been doing some tweaks on the test of the alert bar, and I'm hoping that would go out very soon. I don't think I have any more tweaks left. And I've been thinking about what are we going to do in terms of like quick starts, because in the last call, we had a conversation about having some tutorials on how to actually build adapt. So I will be talking to Jim tomorrow. Hey, Jim, about like, what is he looking for, like about PeerPad and taking that information and hopefully having some instructions on how to build apps, and also looking for more people and got more people to sign up for the call. So in terms of the research that I'm doing about creating a DApp, just I'll put in my email, and you can email me if you would like me to like interview you for 5 minutes. I won't waste too much of your time. So that's what I've been working on.
Cool.
Okay, I can stop sharing. Give me a moment. Am I still sharing?
Yeah.
Okay. There we go.
There we go. Cool. Okay. So in my list, Jim, any quick updates or anything you want to say?
Not much. I've just been working on the pinner for PurePad, which is the big blocker from getting the new version launched. And the good news is it all works now, and it puts stuff into IPFS cluster when you type things in. And that's cool. Not a blocker anymore. So maybe pretty soon.
Awesome. And Dan?
Yeah, not too much here, although some exciting news about my side project. I'm really excited about this community tool set that I'm building out, specifically on top of IPFS to basically be a self-hosted set of tools online between peers on some network. So there's some stuff that's coming along there that I'll report on here shortly. Otherwise, I know I'm getting an IPFS meetup out here in Denver put together pretty shortly. So I'm hoping in the next 2 weeks or so, and I'll have some more media to pump out to you guys and tell you about how cool it is out here.
Awesome. Ollie, what's up?
What's up? I am a long-time listener, first-time caller. I mean, the announcement I've announced everywhere else is IPFS Desktop is released and you should definitely run it. Because I said that in other locations and then people told me it was broken. So we fixed those things that were broken. So now it's even better because it works. I'm interested in the IPFS.io website and blog. Particularly, I've been chatting to Portia on the issue and you have dropped a lot of thoughts on them. Is this a reasonable forum to have a discussion about that? I'm starting to feel ever more responsible for...
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't see another forum. So I guess this is the forum, right?
Specifically, the issue that Portia was talking about when I jumped on the call, the install thing. I think. I think it's an important piece of work. I think it's real, like the stuff that we should have had right 2 years ago, and we're so close. I think the only thing that's blocking it is saying that we're okay with recommending brew or chocolatey as an install path, or hosting a shell script on the immutable web that does the thing. Because I just think telling people to download a tar, unpack the tar, copy it into your user local bin, like the point I feel really strongly about is that rhetoric doesn't help the people who don't understand it and is annoying to the people who already know how to do it. And takes like 15, like it's worse than useless.
Do you remember our fight about what the heck a tar file was when I started?
Right. Yeah.
So you mean a zip file? No, it's not a zip file. Okay.
People also say tar when it's just a zip sometimes.
Yeah, and there's such a narrow sliver of people who will understand what that means and can follow the steps and won't have already known how to do it. So have like BrewWorks or install IPFS.sh hosted via a CID. Like, I know that people feel icky about running shell scripts from the internet, but we could like make the point that here's the script and it's immutable, no surprises.
Yeah, maybe that's actually the place to teach people, is that the CID informs you that it hasn't been tampered with and we've signed off that this is ours.
Right.
Yeah.
Really cool CID. Yes,
Jim.
We're telling people to download stuff on the command line, but we also have IPFS Desktop and we have IPFS Companion. So it's like we should be, I don't know, like install everything, like install all.
Are you confused yet? Because if you're not, then we didn't do our job.
Dude, I have a small sentence that says, if command line's not your thing, then look at IPFS Desktop. So that's been taken care of. But in terms of, I think for now, we can do what most websites do, is just have like 3 different places, be it Linux, be it Microsoft, and be it like Brew, if you want to download it. Linux, I mean, they're used to making their own stuff anyway, and so I think that's a good solution for now, is just have the 3 different ways to install it. But the issue that I have is, what would be a visually succinct way to show people how to install in these 3 ways without crowding the homepage?
Okay. Well, we can. The first thing that comes to my mind is like, it's often done with tabs, where it's like OS X is like we detect whichever one you're on, and we show you the right tab for the system you're on, but the other tabs are visible. But I can spend some time with you, Portia, and we could brainstorm off the call.
Okay, that sounds great. And I really like to detect where it detects your like operating system and already gives you the instructions. I think it's a great idea.
I think Jim's question hasn't quite been answered though, which is like,
I'm sorry, Jim.
Why don't we recommend installing desktop like on the homepage, and then we can link out to desktop apps not your thing, love shell scripts. Here's a multi-step unpacking of a tar described in Markdown, which is probably more your vibe. Jim, sorry, go for it.
So it might be good to just think of other projects like Docker, for example. Docker's got like 50 different ways you can install the thing. Like I just clicked on their page quickly. They're more a developer tool. Well, we're pretty developer tool too.
We took a lot of,
but yeah. But it's just like, it looks like, they're like, who are you? Like before it steers you down the path, which might be something we could do. But would we know which path to steer people down if we knew who people were?
You look like a soft-fingered GUI user. Please.
So Jim, I don't think I got the essence of the question, maybe even a suggestion. So perhaps we should have instructions that are GUI first, and then in the bottom we'll have like, hey, if you want to install this via command line, here are the instructions.
Yeah, well, the GUI gives you the command line, I believe, does it? Does it install a? We don't have a like install the command line tools option.
I preemptively raised that issue to the top of our let's ship this in the next release, because I figured that would be the first question.
Yeah, so I guess if we don't really have that, then we can't really.
But we can shoot for that. Like if we shoot for the next release of desktop, released quickly, has that as a thing, then we can plan a PR for the website. If that seems like a reasonable path, then the rhetoric on the website can be like, install the GUI, and then it's like, oh, are you planning on installing this on a server? Go follow these directions that are in the docs site.
Yeah, what I like about the desktop is it's sort of a foot in the door, and it's like it's pretty easy to add new things into the desktop that are optional downloads or whatever, and
auto updating, and also not connecting to like 1,000 people. The default settings for IPFS don't seem to be optimized for anybody.
Yeah.
They're not good settings for servers. They're not good settings for desktops.
Yeah, and people are like, oh, it's using my bandwidth. And it's like, okay, well, there's web UI, but then they have to go localhost, blah, blah, blah. With the desktop, it's just there. They can see it. They can uninstall it easily. So, yeah.
All right.
So
what I can do is put the actual issue in chat.
Oh,
Go on, sorry, Michael.
I was just reading it a second ago, actually. So Ollie, like one question that I have is that, so we don't really have like a laid out information architecture plan for the website.
Right.
So it's not like always clear, like when we're adding something new, where to put it. I think that like in the interim of not having that plan, I'd like to just defer to you. So like if you think that seems good, then we will just put it there.
Okay.
And that is the checkbox that we will look for.
I'm going to be the state blob of information architecture that you just have to
benevolent dictator for life.
Well, I just want to be able to get stuff merged in, and then if we have too much information at some point, that's like a good problem to have, and then we can think about a better way to organize it. Right?
No one has ever said that about IPFS. We definitely have too much information. But yes, okay. It's nice to hear that, because that's kind of what I was going to do.
Yeah.
Cool.
The blog is something that needs talking about too.
Oh my God.
And I love our newsletter. Our newsletter is awesome. But if you go to our blog, it's just our newsletter, which I get in email. So like I wouldn't.
Yeah. A lot of people don't get those emails though. I mean, that's why.
But I think it could be more varied than just the newsletter. So.
It could, now that we've like fixed the deploy process, and there's like 6 articles just stuck in review purgatory because everyone's got opinions. I think maybe we could dial down the levels.
Where is our review purgatory?
IPFS/blog/PRs or however that works.
I wonder if doing it on GitHub. I know we do everything on GitHub, but there are like better tools out there than just GitHub for reviewing blogs.
You're a dreamer, Jim. You're gonna suggest we use Medium? I heard that Mosh had that fight like 2 years ago.
We were actually really close to using it again, actually, and then Terry sends me this fucking article yesterday that they changed it.
I'm so mad.
They basically just like ruined it if you're not making paid content. Now. Yeah.
I think
discoverability, no more.
Jim's point is like the blog has nothing but the newsletter on. Also, just the typography on the blog is almost unreadable in my eyes. But that's a minor.
That's
point.
Fixable.
I can fix that. We just need someone to monitor the pull requests on blog and be like, I think this article is ready now. I'm going to press merge.
We could we have lots of video content. Like we get to mix some video content in there. Like it doesn't. The front page of the blog doesn't just have to be the blog. Like it can be a mix of content. Like it's our content strategy. You know, there's people that do that. We probably actually employ people that do that. So.
Oh, we definitely do not. No.
We're looking for people.
No. There is like a whole thread about hiring those people, and like there's like a long history there that I won't get into. But we definitely don't. Like we hire somebody who like edits the videos and puts them up, and is very good at like the production.
Does a great job.
But, but like we don't have like someone who's like promoting that content.
But if you know someone, please let us know.
Okay, cool. Right. I think we're good there. Terry, you want to use the last 10 minutes to do the roadmap stuff? Yeah. Thanks, Ollie. That like unblocks a lot of stuff. So thank you. Sweet.
Yes. So I just took a bunch of notes because we didn't have a note taker, but I will not be doing that while I talk. So if anybody cares to, please feel free. Also, Ollie, there's a bunch of question marks. If you could fill in what I missed, that'd be lovely. Thank you. Okay. Trying to find the right screen to share with y'all again.
Okay. Well, do you mind? Yeah, of course. Do you mind transferring?
So.
I will take some notes while you talk.
Thanks.
Oh.
Okay. So. For those who aren't aware, in theory, in the near future, Proto School will kind of be its own top level project. And in preparation for that, I've been working on drafting a roadmap, which is kind of a longer term, like looking a year-ish out. And that's obviously going to be more vague at that level. And then drafting OKRs for Q2.
Can everyone mute? I can't hear. Is it?
It's me, sadly.
Is it? Oh, sorry.
So
nice background.
Thank you. So this is a first look at the roadmap. Is it going to be so bad that I need to take some time to leave, or is it okay?
I'll figure it out. It's fine.
Okay. So we start with this vision of making it easy to get started with decentralized web technologies. Really, this is kind of like being an onboarding place for people who are new, or a place that makes it easy to get up to speed on specific protocols, et cetera. And then these are kind of my proposals for these guiding principles, which will kind of shape as we look at requests people have for what we do next, making sure that we stay within this kind of guide. So in terms of the online tutorials, that they stay beginner friendly. And by that, I don't mean that there will never be advanced content. I mean that we don't add advanced content until we have intermediate content. So we have scaffolding. So you can, within Proto School, get yourself up to where you want to be. There are other places where we can put content. We can continue, like as the IPFS community working group, to create ideas for things that don't fit in our format right now. There are lots of ways to make things happen, but what I want to avoid, I want to make sure this stays cohesive, consistently formatted, as opposed to being like everyone thinks decentralized plus education equals Proto School. It's not that broad. It shouldn't be that broad. And then in terms of the community, we want to make sure we have a growing community of local self-governing chapters that are walking through our tutorials at live events with support from mentors. That's the basic principle there. And then for all of this stuff, online, GitHub stuff, chapter discussions, we want to make sure we are providing a welcoming and inclusive environment. And that goes back to, for example, making sure that we're enforcing our code of conduct. The chapter organizers are all doing that, or they won't be chapter organizers. So let me pause there for a second before I get into more specific goals. Is there any initial feedback to this? Disagreement, questions? Yes, Ollie?
Have you got any thoughts about how you might monitor enforcement of code of conduct? One of the things about node schools were it was completely like diffuse and you never really knew much about the people who were running them. It would be difficult to have enforced that.
Yeah.
Right. So right now, the way it works is that we have a central code of conduct that applies to everyone that all of the chapter organizers need to agree to. And then every chapter has a code of conduct. So in that chapter's code of conduct, it says if your chapter organizers are not doing a good job, you can alert us. And then the main code of conduct includes an email that's like a mail serve that goes to both Michael and I. So it is possible to kind of escalate. This is the way they do it also at Global Diversity CFP Day. There are people standing by kind of at the global level to deal with stuff, but you were correct that we won't know about everything that happens lower down. We also have an issue where like if someone leaves an English version of their code of conduct and then also creates one in their local language and they change it and it's no longer in line with our guidelines, I won't know.
I think it's good and important to just set that precedent. I think that's a huge first step.
Another thing that Node School didn't do is that we didn't force the local organizers to assign a person to the code of conduct for enforcement. So even there at that local level, we're like making sure that they have a person that is like dealing with enforcement, and then an escalation path if they don't. So it's like we have like 2 extra things on top of the Node School process.
Yeah, meaning your chapter will not go on our website until it has a piece of contact information for an individual. It can't be team@company.com. It needs to be someone who's responsible or a list that you've set up that all 3 of your chapter organizers will receive, et cetera. So we've laid some of the groundwork, and a lot of this is like laying the groundwork the best we can and then dealing and adapting as things come up. Anything else on guiding principles before I continue? Okay. All right. So keeping in mind that this is vaguer, the more we get into the future, the less dependable this is, subject to improvement. So I've kind of checked this out into 4 top level goals, and I'll first just like show you all 4 of them. So in terms of content development, we want the Proto School website to include an increasing range of tutorial content from across multiple projects. Learner experience. So this is more like the UX, the improvements to how things work. The Proto School website structure and design supports a positive learning experience. Community growth. Chapter leaders are enabled to foster local learning communities around the globe. And then project management, internal structures position Proto School for future growth. So those are the 4 kind of key areas that when I look at all of the requests that come in, all of the work I do, that I feel like things tend to fall into. And then within those, I've tried to break down kind of a Q2 versus medium term, and what's within those medium terms, like how things get prioritized will shift as we assess needs over time. So this first one for content development includes things like finishing up the file API, likely creating something that will work for IPFS Camp if that continues to be a need of the IPFS team. And that will be with those folks taking the lead on the content and me helping to edit that. And then making sure that the process for building tutorials is really clearly documented. And that's something I'm doing kind of side by side with my process on the file API right now. So those are sort of the most urgent things in terms of that content growth. And in the future, we certainly want to add content from other projects, libp2p, IPLD, obviously increase the IPFS content significantly, iterate on that process as we go, seeing what helps people build. And as we go, adding more content on other projects, assessing the demand for things like command line tutorials. Right now, I think the focus on in-browser tutorials is what we need to do. We need to build a significant chunk of content before we go back, circle back and see whether command line makes sense as a functionality to add and whether we can add it. And then talk about things like, do people want content from DAT or a project like that to be included? But those are kind of down the road. We need to make sure we have this solid content stuff there first. So that's kind of the idea on the content growth side. Learner experience. This is what a lot of the recommendations that you see in the issue queue are, these like UX, can we do this? So this one will come out when we put the new file tutorial out, but the ability to upload a file that makes you now have 3 ways to have a tutorial work, either just text or a normal code exercise, or one where you upload a file and then work with the file in your code exercise. We want to restructure the way our view components work. So there is a landing page for a specific tutorial, which is going to make it much easier to link. It'll make it easy to just like have this component that is the lessons listed out within a tutorial and plop that into different places. And what we'd like to do to kind of encourage this idea of, just because we don't have that content here doesn't mean we don't care about it. Have a lesson that's the last in each tutorial that has suggestions for things you might want to do next that might not fit in the proto school framework. So like if Portia were to build a quick start or a, what's the word, Portia? Like a
DAP, like an example, yeah, like IPFS DAP.
An example DAP. If we wanted to say, you know, after we teach you to use the file API, hey, take a look at the share.ipfs.io, which uses the file API to see how you might use this in practice, stuff like that. Or places you should now be qualified to contribute to now that you have these skills, et cetera. So ways to link out to content that doesn't necessarily fit our format. And then as we get into medium term, I'd really like to take a closer look from a UX perspective, usability testing, address a lot of the user feedback that we have. And some of this will certainly happen earlier than that, but we'll see what we have time for. There's some confusion about clarity of the relationship between lessons and tutorials, and a lot of stuff we can do with UX to improve that. Building functionality like labeling, sorting, filtering tutorials by subject matter, improving branding and visual design, adding diagrams, letting a user view the solution to a challenge, hopefully figuring out whether we can let view have different metadata for each tutorial. So if you shared it online, you get something more specific, stuff like that. And then longer term chunking, once we have a lot more content, figuring out how to chunk that into courses of study. How do we want to deal with that useful concepts? Is it embedded glossary support? Stuff like that are kind of ideas, whether we can do localization, translation, all of that stuff is kind of on the more future end of that roadmap for functionality of the site and user experience. Community growth. And this one, you'll see that this lags a little behind the rest of it. And it's intentional because what I've discovered is we get, like Dan is a fabulous example of doing exactly what we meant to happen. His first event was working through the tutorials online, but a lot of our chapter organizers are doing other content. They're having an event that's about the decentralized web, but has nothing to do with our content. In Dan's case, that would be because he ran out of content to present. So the more content we can provide in the form of those online tutorials, the more we can ask organizers to do that model for their events. So you'll see I'm kind of postponing a proactive push to get more organizers. We'll keep welcoming new organizers in, but first we want to make the process of supporting them easier. So starting with automating chapter repo creation, clarifying some guidance for chapter organizers, and then down the road, as we have more organizers, more events, more content, making sure we're providing positive examples of the events that are run in the model we intended, what got people there, how people are using GitHub for community discussions, et cetera. offering more opportunities for chapter leaders to talk to each other, whether that's online or sync meetings or whatever it is, helping to amplify things through social channels, maybe more swag. And then when we really have those structures in place that we can support people and they have the content to use, then intentionally pulling in more chapter organizers by targeting IPFS meetup groups, highlighting that events, calling in social. And then once we have enough, maybe we build a little map that shows the participation around the world, stuff like that. So you see that kind of intentionally lagging, not because we don't care about our awesome chapter organizers, but because we'll be able to support them better when we have more content. And then there's a number of things that just kind of position us for growth. So one of the things we really want to do is get more feedback on how our tutorials are playing out for people. And we can do that by adding, figuring out when they're completing lessons, refreshing code to see what lessons are too hard, adapting our URL strategy so that analytics tools can distinguish which sub-page people are on, because of the way View works, it's all the same page to these tools. And then doing things like determining capacity needs. Right now, we have about 2/3 of me and 1/10 of Michael working on this project regularly. So what do we need? What are the areas where we need more support? Assessing whether we want to have a blog or publication under the Proto School umbrella, looking at how cultural differences affect local chapter needs, stuff like that. And further out here will kind of depend where things show up, where we have community support and where we need to build that in. So those are kind of the 4 structures, kind of the 4 top level goals and how I'm thinking of that progression. And I'm very open to feedback here as we kind of walk us down. Anything that strikes people initially?
Just on your last point around support, we're about to go into this period of figuring out what we should be focusing on for the next quarter. It seems to me that it's difficult to justify spending lots of time on the web UI, given that things like Proto School don't have enough active developer support right now, and we could be and should be hiring for that. But over the next quarter, it would seem to make sense to get some of the GUI team's time on this.
I am not opposed to that. I do think
given that we're already here and we already know the setup.
Yeah, help is always welcome. So definitely something to talk about.
It's the enlightened self-interest of IPFS Camp being on the horizon. And if we do a good job at Proto School, then that does a lot of the work for IPFS Camp.
Yeah, and so I think what will really happen in Q2 is, I'm talking to the leads of the working groups within IPFS, who are in turn responsible for creating the content for IPFS Camp, about what workshops they're hoping to have there. And we want to identify which ones fit, within these guiding principles, which things actually fit in Proto School. And then I will be needing to lean on those leaders, those teams, to do the bulk of the content creation work, with me blending a lot of that, oh, I don't know what you mean. This isn't beginner friendly enough. How does it fit in with the other content? How can we make sure that we fit in the framework, helping people understand how the View templates work, et cetera. And as that plays out, I think we'll get a better sense of how demanding is this on someone from a project to volunteer their time? Should we have just been hiring people, creating capacity within the Proto School team to be doing this, and just kind of pinging the people in the project team? So this is definitely the right time to experiment with that, and then justify the case for where we need the support within the Proto School project. Does that make sense?
It certainly does. I think I'm imagining putting something about Proto School on the GUI team's Q2 goals, so that we can justify a chunk of time on it.
Yeah, you definitely have people who have ended up contributing time as we find those intersections of, oh crap, that thing doesn't work, because how can IPFS work better with you, or all that stuff. So you've all been super helpful already. Any other feedback on this draft as a whole?
Yeah, so just looking.
So this might be a little bit longer term, but seeing, like you say, we kind of run out of content on a one-off with what we have right now. But as we do have more, so how do we structure here's a demo package of how you could run a few events in concurrence. And like, so in my view, I'm still looking for like proto school chapters. What's the real goal? Is the goal to have us just effectively have a few different workshop style events, and that's kind of it? It's a one-off. Like, what do we want out of the chapters now that that's happened? You see?
Perfect. Yeah. No, that sounds
And
good.
hopefully we can get enough content so people don't need to ask that question so soon. Like, I think ultimately, the thing I don't want is for someone, I don't know. There are places where people are like adding a proto school label to stuff they were going to do anyways, which isn't the end of the world in certain situations, depending what they were planning to do. But maybe you would have like a talk, maybe you'd like invite a guest speaker in and then work on these tutorials. And depending what the turnover is like in your audience also, it's not that you can only do the introductory one once. Maybe you're in a place where you have new people coming in and you do want to circle back and repeat some content. But I do think that the main focus, like it would be for Node School chapters, is like those tutorials helping people work through. But Michael can probably speak more to that based on his experience with Node School and what, like if people have been adding in other forms of content.
Yeah. I mean, so what I would say is like, you know, right now we're in this position where the content is really dictating like what people are able to do. And what I would like to get to the point where there is enough, like so much content that the actual local community needs are driving what each local community is doing, right? Like what you saw in Node School was that in some communities, like big cities, every time they would do one, they would have so many new people that just wanted to learn Node that they were just doing the introductory stuff over and over again every time because that was like what their community needed. And then in smaller communities, it was like the same people coming back month over month. And so they could, you know, climb up a ladder and take on some of the more advanced stuff. And you know, you saw other communities where they would be like, okay, well, you know, we're going to do the introduction one twice, but then we're going to do like this advanced one, and like they would try to like pull people who had done the beginner one into that stuff. But like it was very much like organized by the local organizers deciding what their local community needed. And I would love to get to that point where we don't have, we're not really like recommending like, hey, do exactly this. We have like a set of best practices that have worked for a bunch of different communities in different situations, but really like you should do whatever your community is demanding. Obviously right now it's just like, oh yeah, do these, and then you run out, and then yeah, there's not much left to do. And you know, even in big cities right now, I feel like there isn't like so much demand for distributed stuff. Like I have like finally some numbers now and sort of like growth of the communities around these decentralized technologies, and it's definitely rising, but it's not yet at the point where every month there's just 20 new people that want to learn this. So you have people that are coming back, and then we're just running out of content. So yeah, I think that right now the focus is just on creating more content, getting more of these like ladders up to more advanced topics. And then once we have a bunch of content, then we can talk about, you know, what these communities need and how to provide best practices for them.
Cool. One thing as well along this in terms of content. So I know we have on the repo a bunch of different issues bringing up ideas around what we might want to see coming next. Do we have something like an actual graphical tree of effectively what we think that we need to build that ladder? Because you do want to have structure. It isn't just whatever random. You want from beginner to advanced. So is that somewhere where I can see the stepwise content plan?
No, and I agree with you that I think the majority of the suggestions people have made are too advanced and don't have the scaffolding. And one of the things that I'm having trouble with right now is that I don't understand the technology enough to recommend like what are the intermediate steps that we need to get there. So it would be very helpful to me if someone were helping to respond to those issues and say, okay, here are the things that I think we should build first. And that's something we'll work on as we go. But you're right, Dan, that's not something we've surfaced. And mostly we're kind of putting in the future category a lot of those recommendations. And the other thing that we need to do and keep in mind as Portia works on other formats of content is which of those things like could be addressed right now. They're advanced, they could be addressed right now in another format in a fun way, meet a learning need that people have that just doesn't fit in this format. And then we link out to it from here. So we want to work on both of those angles. Ollie, you've had your...
Exactly.
Sorry,
Ali.
Just that I recognize that problem from running London Node School, and to what Michael said, that we were in a position where there was a lot of people coming and they just wanted to do the beginners classes over and over again. That got kind of boring for the mentors, but it was okay. But it's there's an interesting question of like with a workshop based meetup, like the thing that worked well in London was we had like the community meetup, LNUG, and we had Node School, and we would kind of do them in rotation. Like the meetup where we just gave talks was every month, but the Node School was maybe like every 3 months. So sort of, I imagine that pattern would work reasonably well. Like if you can find people in your area who are just interested in the D-Web in general, or IPFS superfans. Like, I don't know if the IPFS ambassadors program is still on pause or is a thing, but
it's on pause.
Yeah. Okay. But that kind of suggestion, I would imagine, is like, meet up as regularly as your community will tolerate or is excited about, and then interleave talks with workshops.
Right. And so actually, I think to that point, running an IPFS meetup here in Denver around Proto School occasionally is what's, I think, going to work really well, as opposed to my only goal is to have Proto School run on again and again and again. In fact, I think they really are symbiotic, or not even necessarily IPFS. It could be, like you say, like there's somebody who's really interested in dApps and wants to run an Ethereum meetup specifically.
Totally.
Runs Proto School every once in a while.
So
maybe encouraging that kind of behavior is good, especially while we're low on content.
And I think that is encouraged. Like in Berlin, like Proto School is part of IPFS. And I know there are other communities within the distributed web that'll be more than happy to like run a Proto School as an event. And this is a good chance for us to cross-pollinate with other communities as well, and not just be like Proto School, and also as a way to grow Proto School too, and to get more people into like Proto School dedicated meetups.
Yeah. One thing that we saw like with Node School, once it got like incredibly popular, was that really tiny places would start running them because they didn't actually have like a meetup venue where they could give talks. They didn't have a big enough community to do meetup, but they could totally have like 5 to 10 people sit down and do workshops and learn Node. And then they did that long enough that they did have a big enough community for a meetup and started running meetups like through that. So there was like an interesting kind of ladder that happened there in a lot of the smaller cities. Yeah, cool. This was great. That was also like a great set of roadmap. Like that was awesome. Thanks, Sherry.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Okay.
I'll skip showing you Q2 OER since they're kind of embedded in the roadmap, but it's like that, but in Excel.
There you go.
And with P whatever is attached to them. And my name next to almost everything as usual. A couple of Michaels in there. Yeah.
I have one. Cool. Okay. This is great. We're like 15 minutes over, but it was a good meeting, so who cares? Awesome. Thank you, everybody. See y'all next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.